Hi there, Let's Talk Sports fans. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Let's Talk New York Sports, and I'm joined by my co-host Keith Engle from TGI Sports Talk. Thanks for joining me today.
Awesome to be here, Dan. Lots going on in New York sports. Obviously, we got a full week of baseball under our belts. We got a lot going on.
Yeah, we definitely have. I can't wait to talk to about you. Even in the NFL, it's not like there's loads, but there's like enough to get your weekly
There's,
dose of NFL as well.
well, there's
So,
the weekly Aaron Rodgers intrigue. So there's always something.
well, um, there is that too. I mean, he isn't technically on the topics this week, but
That's okay.
one
That's
of the subjects plays into it.
okay. That's fine.
Um, so, Keith, I caught your show last night, your one-on-one with Keith Engle's show, and I haven't caught your show with Carlos this morning. How did it go?
That went well. We reviewed. We talked a little bit about the after with the end of the NCAA tournament. We got talking about the NCAA blue bloods in basketball and how UConn fits into that lexicon now. And we talked Major League Baseball and some of the starts of some of the teams and what else did we talk about? A little bit about Aaron Rodgers, a little bit about Bill Belichick and Mac Jones. We talked about a lot of stuff, and it was a pretty calm show for the most part. Until he told me kickers were the most, the high scoring teams in the league were the kickers were the most responsible for getting there, which might
Uh,
be the most interesting thing he'd ever said to me. But anyway, it was a good show. And speaking of last night's interview with Chuck Foreman, that was a lot of fun to do last week. So it was. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and it's getting some pretty good hits on Viking sites and stuff that I was sharing it to.
I love that, and yeah, excited to see the rest was coming up. And shout out to our mutual friend Scott Coe, fellow Patriots fan, saying, "How are you?" Pretty good. Keith, you good?
I'm sure we'll get into that too, Scott. So I'm
Um,
sure. Go ahead, Dan.
so so shout out to Carlos. Yeah, that I love kickers as much as the next person, probably more so. What I think is, or I hope his point was, if you're gonna have a playoff caliber team, you need to make use of the PFTs and field goals and
Yeah.
have a consistent outlay. That's what I hope he
Well,
meant.
in the context of our conversation, without a quarterback, you can have the best kicker in the league, and you're not going to, lead the league in scoring. That's for sure. So, that was the context of the whole thing. So, I thought it was funny.
Everyone be sure to check it out, and also be sure to follow TGI Sports Talk both on Facebook and YouTube. Keith does a great job, and it's worth it just to see some of his rants. And Carlos is always good for a hot take or two, so be sure to follow all Keith's content.
Yeah, he tries to keep himself calm. It doesn't always happen, but he tries.
Um, before we talk a little Giants, what was Scott's comment? I didn't quite.
I'll play this. I'll put this one up first. There's nothing better than extraordinary kicker talk. He had talked about what are our thoughts on the Mets and can they stay with the Braves. So I'm sure you have some Mets talk lined up for us anyway. So that's what his
We
comment.
definitely will get to that. I mean, I guess before we get to the Patriots, if we start with the Giants, an interesting topic I saw on a few comments on some of our Giants episodes on LTS that there's some fans saying they was disappointed in Tibero and he was a bit of a mispick, if you will, and that surprised me a little bit. I wanted to get your. We didn't talk too much during the season with my health situation, but I don't. I thought he had a good season. Was he up there with Nick Bosa's numbers or something like that? No, but I felt like he had a good season. He also missed some of it through injury, so I don't really see it that they've missed on the pick. And everything I saw backs up what I thought when they made the pick that he's going to be a very good player on that defense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, he could have. Maybe he wasn't the best rookie out there to rip, or even the best rookie defensive player out there. But when he was on the field, I thought he was productive most of the time. And it's way too early to say that he's any kind of bust of any sort. I think he'll be fine. And some guys take a little longer to get their footing, and I think Thibodeau will be fine. Look, New York fans are tough, and I'm one of them. So everybody needs to perform right now, and I'm the same way. A lot of times, we just got to sit back and relax a little bit. He's liable to make a big step forward this year, and he's going to go a long ways keeping that Giant team, heading in the right direction.
Andre, I mean, D linemen, you often take a season or two. The trick is if they're not just getting absolutely wasted in their duels, that's when you can tell. I can remember Quinn Williams, his first season, he was largely ineffective, and fans were saying, "Oh, we busted. He's a bust. We've missed out on X, Y, and Z, what we can have." And look, he had a Pro Bowl season this year. So D linemen do take at least a year to completely have an effect in
Yeah,
this generational talent. And
exactly.
Tibbs, I didn't really see as a generational talent. I saw him as one of these pass rushers, what will be a very good pass rusher, but not necessarily that elite of elite guy. But I do think he will be a Pro Bowler when all's said and done, probably multiple years. I think give him a bit of time, and it has to be said, although that defense was good, obviously the coaching staff did a good job, but there weren't really many players on that defense you'd have to double team. He was probably the only one on that D line, in my opinion. So that has to be said. What will he look like when he has a bit more talent around him?
And that's one thing guys don't take into consideration, right? They read a stat line and they think, "Oh my gosh, he really isn't performing at all." And if you're not watching the games and seeing that he's making other guys better because he's taking up two bodies, you miss that. So yeah, I think he's fine, and I think he will be a Pro Bowl player for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I'm always a bit defensive over him. I did a lot of homework into him because there's a chance the Jets could have took him, and I just think he got a raw deal with the media. So I kind of am willing him to succeed because whereas there's a rhetoric, oh, he's a selfish player, and this bad cat. I don't think we saw anything of that. Even if you say he's driven to make a little bit of money, well, I can guarantee you, every rookie coming in the league is motivated by money. They're not playing for free. So I thought he got a raw deal. So I'm hoping he has a lot of success in the league just to prove the doubt was wrong. I think it make a good story.
Well, he's always going to be compared throughout his career, probably to Sauce Gardner, right? I mean, the Giants. I mean, if the picks were swapped, they might have taken Sauce Gardner, but they didn't have that opportunity, so they took the best player for their system. And I think, unfortunately, those two guys will probably be linked together throughout their careers. Maybe not, unfortunately, maybe fortunately for them, but they'll both have to deal with that at some point.
Yeah, I do agree with that. So the Patriots, a couple of things I wanted to discuss with you. First of all, there's been a lot of talk this week about Mac Jones. Did Bill Belichick try to trade him? Do you believe it, Keith, is what I wanted to ask before we get to the second topic about him?
I think it's possible. I mean, to me, this is a weird subject, right? Because everybody in the Patriot organization still is high on Mac Jones. They don't feel last year was fair to judge his success or lack of success because of all the turmoil on the offense, and Bill Belichick caused that turmoil. He had some injuries. he goes outside the organization to ask some questions back to his alma mater, as it turns out. We didn't know this. We knew in January that he went out to talk to outsiders. We didn't know it was somebody at Alabama, which probably wasn't the smartest thing to do because Nick Saban and Belichick are very tight. And it's very interesting that Bill O'Brien is now the offensive coordinator. So it's all kind of a weird symmetry there. But Belichick is not happy about this, and I don't necessarily blame him. I don't have a problem with Mac Jones going and seeking help from his old where he went to college, but maybe keep your coaches apprised of what you're doing, and don't get them blindsided so they look foolish. And Belichick, for all his success, I mean, he can be a little petty and hold a grudge, and it's possible he's offered him around Dan. People have pretty much said at quarterback he's not going to get anything at this point, I don't think. But it's also possible, and I've thought about this a lot. I think it's very possible that he is mad. Don't get me wrong, but that he's going to use this now and use the fact that there'll be a competition in training camp to motivate Mac Jones a little bit, and use it to get him pissed off, more or less. Sorry for my French, but and maybe keep that chip on his shoulder, which it worked well with Tom Brady for a lot of years, and maybe he's using the same kind of logic with Mac Jones. It's a weird situation again because everybody speaks his praises, from Bill O'Brien right to the owner, everybody except Bill Belichick, and I feel like it might be just him using a little motivational tool.
Yeah, I'd agree. And to be honest with you, I think any player on the roster is always up for grabs in regard to the Patriots, and particularly when they're coming off a down season. I just think that's who he is. It could be very much he was trying to gauge what his value is, and if someone offered something what he viewed acceptable, he would do it. It's coming from a man who last year you traded away your Pro Bowl guard for
Mm-hmm.
what he considered value. I don't consider it value, but that's a different story. But he's always open to doing a deal, and that's because and he has been for many years. He thinks he's the smartest man in the room, so he thinks he can get X for one guy, bring in another guy, and get someone else. So
Yeah.
I probably think he is shopping in, but not necessarily desperate.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, if somebody blew blew him away with an offer, then would he consider it? Sure. But he'd trade anybody for if you blew him away with an offer. So I wouldn't be shocked. And to Scott's point, first of all, Bill does need to kind of get a grip, but he can be a petty guy sometimes, and he holds grudges, and hopefully this isn't one that will wreck their relationship for good. And you do need to know who's going to replace him, because I don't think he's really comfortable going into training camp with Bailey Zappi as his starting quarterback. I wouldn't be after, 1.5 good games.
I think personally, one of the reasons why he did this in his head, and this is probably what he would probably say to Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi can do everything he does in that system. I don't believe in that. I think, especially as he played more games and people had more tape, whereas people said it, I don't think he was anywhere near as good as Mac Jones. Does he have a certain element where he can play a bit freer than Mac Jones? Yes, but I also think technically he's a lot worse, personally speaking. So I don't believe it, but I think in Bill's head, maybe because, as you said, he's not completely sold on Mac, he thought, well, there's not that much of a difference.
A lot of this too, you got to remember, Bill's never come out and said, boy, did I make a mistake last year with the offense and put it in the hands of, two capable coaches. He felt if you're a good coach, you can coach any position or either side of the football. Well, that's not, that wasn't the best use of the talent of those guys. And it was doing a disservice to Mac Jones. The second-year development of a quarterback is really important in my mind. And I think they did a disservice to the quarterback. And Bill's never really come out and said, yeah, it was a mistake, even though he, moved on after a year. I think he needed some prodding maybe from the owner to do it. And even if he did it on his own, at least say, I was wrong. I made a mistake. I thought it would work and it didn't. I'm moving on. But he's not able to do that.
Andre. One before we move on, one shout out to Mac because he's been getting a bit of bad press. I do know this week with it being Autism Awareness Month, he attended the high school, took part with kids with the condition, and that's something what I want to see from my quarterback. They still need to be good on the field, but I do like that he's using his off season to do stuff in the community like that. So it doesn't mean he'll be your
No,
franchise guy, but a special little note there of
I think
something.
the organization loves his makeup. That stuff is all really good stuff, Dan. And I think they like his makeup, and I think they think he's mentally tough enough to overcome what happened last year, and probably the stuff that Bill's throwing at him now. And as Rick says, Bill would say, "On to the Dolphins. Let's just move on." But and Scott, by the way, he had mentioned bring back Babe Parilli, and I was about to say I didn't think you were nearly as old as me, Scott, but maybe you are because if you're talking about Babe Parilli, you're not the Generation Z guy as I talked about with CA earlier. And Rick, by the way, welcome, Rick. We didn't get the chance to say welcome, and Rick had some questions about interviews. Maybe we'll go back to those at the end of the show, the end.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll definitely get to that, Rick. And as Keith said, thanks for joining us. Always good to see you in the comments. So, this one will probably be a quicker one. The Bills have continued to bring back some of their veterans this week, bringing back Jordan Phillips to that D line, which it's not one that's going to be top of the feed for Ian Rappaport or something like that. But vital importance, there's a lot of young guys on that D line, so just bringing back someone like that is important because the wheels kind of come off last year. So um, anytime you can add a veteran what's familiar with system is important. So yeah, it's not something what's going to make waves, but I think this is the correct decision.
I do too, and the Bills are in a funny situation right now. I mean, they lost one of their best defensive players. They haven't really. I mean, they didn't make any really big splashes that I can, say that. Well, that's a eye opener in free agency. I don't know what their draft plans are, but you know, we've touched on it a little bit in previous shows, and I have on some other shows. The Bills are just they're kind of in a precarious situation. They need to move forward because the rest of the division is going to catch up with them quickly, potentially. The Dolphins, we already know, are pretty good. The Jets could get very good quickly, depending on whether Rodgers does show up and if he does, if it doesn't implode, they could be very good all of a sudden. I can see the Patriots winning anywhere from 12 games next year, Dan, to 5. I don't know what's going to happen with the Patriots, but the division is going to be very fluid, and the Bills, I think, are in a bit of a precarious situation if they don't make some improvements.
Yep, I agree. We will see. Watch this space in regard to the Bills. So podcast is a newer member of Let's Talk Sports. They're at this point just audio. They're moving to video this week to join Let's Talk Sports as it happens. Excited to have them involved. They've been
Oh,
commenting on a lot of stuff, which is how we run the community. So shout out to them, and I'm looking forward to having them on the platform and everyone getting to know them.
absolutely. Welcome aboard. Good to have you guys with us, and happy to see you see if Keith knows what he's talking about here and there. Every once in a while they do. Scotty's got the Bills will finish second or third if the Jets get Rodgers. Interesting. I wonder where he likes our Patriots in that scenario. I'm a little worried.
Bottom, or that's what he said on the show, Sunday show I did with him a couple of weeks ago. So, and there was some guys on the panel what thought the Patriots could be up there for the worst. We talked a little bit about this last week that the Bill O'Brien thing is um a factor what we can't really account for. What does that jump look like? I do think they won't be necessarily be as bad as people think, just
I mean,
as they are. But the key thing will be the draft. They can't have a draft like last year, in my opinion.
well, last year's draft is I think it's incomplete. The grade, right? I think Cole Strange had a good first year, and I think they're. I'm very happy he's headed, and I think Thornton might be another guy that comes out of that draft. I think they're still high on him, and I think he's got some upside. Other than that, it's a little shaky. I definitely agree, but it's not a total wash yet. And I don't think this team is going to be one of the worst in football. I don't know how you can say that. This team was only a few plays away from making the playoffs last year. I mean, this isn't a horrible football team. A couple of bounces go different ways. This team's in the playoffs last year. So anyway, we'll see.
Interesting how they look because um, not everyone can be good in the division. What you think will be so. Will they get games? Will they be in more contention more because some of, say, the Dolphins or the Jets slip up against them from someone what's watched a lot of losing performances against the Patriots? I'm not banking on the Jets beating them, so that's going to be an interesting thing. If they can even go 1-1 against teams, that's going to shake up the division a little bit. So it's going to be interesting.
I think it's going to be a very tough division. And, podcast he thinks New England will take a little dip this year unless their draft picks really show up. And as we kind of just mentioned, they aren't going to be terrible. They could still be a wild card team. I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, again, if they take a dip, I don't think it'll be that much. And again, I think they could surprise. They could surprise if Mac Jones can take that next step that he was on his way to until they derailed him last year, and they can find, and Thornton can be maybe an outside threat, and Stevenson continues to develop in that backfield, and the defense can replace the leadership of Devin McCourty. This team could still be a contender in the right circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. So
Yeah, that's a
let's
good question.
ask, where do you think they'll go in the draft? We talked a little bit
Yeah,
about this last week. We spoke
I,
linebacker a little bit,
yeah,
maybe
I think
corner.
maybe. I think maybe athletic linebacker, offensive line. I think is still a possibility too because they need to improve a couple of spots there in my mind. And then you've got to replace, one of the greatest players in Patriot history, Devin McCourty as well. So they got some places they can go. I would expect to see one of those three slots go pretty quickly, and probably draft a couple tight ends as well, which is kind of their norm. Kind of like Brian Branch. I haven't looked at individual players yet. I got to probably dive into that pretty quickly, but I've heard the name Branch bantied about for sure.
And apparently he's fallen a little bit as well. All that's the rumour that he will, just because he didn't test as well as people expected that were combining with safeties. They have been falling a little bit compared to where they thought they would go at the top of the season. So um, we will see.
We'll get into the draft.
Just
I'll have a lot better feel of the draft here in the next week or so with the NCAA basketball and all this stuff going on in baseball. It's been I haven't had really time to dive much into the draft, but I'm running out of time, so we got to do that.
yeah, I agree. So but podcasts, and so don't know why everyone's high on the fins. It's going to be interesting. Obviously, the talking point will be if Tua can't have a season like he did last year, and I don't mean on the field, I mean exactly the opposite of it. He needs, if he's healthier, I'll be honest, I'm more scared of the Dolphins than I am the Bills because they've already added more talent
Mm-hmm.
and they haven't got all their draft capital, but um, if they can add a bit more talent, I just feel they're deeper and I'd more I think they're on an upward trajectory. But if Tua has a season with concussions like last year, their season's going to go down a lot
We,
lower than we're expecting.
yeah, we know they can't. You can't win without a quarterback, and if Tua is not able to play the majority of the games, and by the way, if he has the same kind of issues he had this year, he's liable not to be playing at all uh, going forward. I mean, because you can't continue to have those types of injuries and expect to continue to play in the league. So for that reason, I'm not terribly high on the Dolphins just because of those question marks. And I know they signed Mike White, but he hasn't even proved he could stay on the field if he has to
Um,
as well.
I was going to say, I will say this, and I said this to Johnny. I have more faith in Tua staying on the field than Mike White because for the amount of games Mike White has played, he can't get through a game and a half without getting injured. So, from someone that's watched him over the last 3 seasons, that's just my take on it.
Yeah. And I guess Scott's giving us the lowdown on his potential draft pick. Can't seem to get off the Pats here today. What do you got here from podcast?
Tua Christian, but they played good defense. It went south. It did go south, but a lot of that's some of it's to do with Tua's health, and
Yeah,
obviously the health of Teddy was also not great. To be honest, the O line was not great. It, I would assume they'll go heavier in the draft. We will see, and some of it was rookie coaching, not mistakes, but just learning from McDaniel. So I expect them to take a level up. I could be wrong. I've been wrong many times before, but that's just my take on it.
and Rick's kind of backing up what I said. I mean, he may have to consider getting out if
Yeah,
these types of injuries continue into another
um,
season. There's going to be some
I,
tough decisions to be made.
I agree. I mean, I do think that, but from what we saw last year, this is going to sound harsh, but I don't think he has sense to protect himself. I don't mean that badly, but you saw he wants to come in as soon as he can. So unless he just say gets another concussion and something clicks and he says, right, I've got to look after myself. I
Yeah,
don't think he's going to be of that
yeah,
mentality. He should be because let's be honest, being where he was picked, his future's already secured unless he's just not lived sensibly. But that you're long time retired. If he wants to be in a position where he can pick up his kids, even bend down to pick them up and live a full life, he's got to start to look after himself. So I'm going to be interested. I'm kind of rooting for him, even though he's a Dolphins player. One, obviously, it's tied to the happiness of our guy Johnny, but also I think he's a fine young man. He was. Um, I don't think he's treated great his first couple of years in the league by the organisation, so I'm hoping it works out well for him.
yeah. And I think he had 3 concussions last year
Yeah,
for sure that we know about, and it might have been more, but we're having trouble getting back to New York here. I might have missed it. Sorry for the sports news. How do you feel about the Knicks? I'm sure we'll be talking about that too. So I'll let you.
yeah. Essentially, that will be last up. So
Oh,
before we
we'll get
move to base, yeah, we definitely will get to it. Keith, so the Jets have made a few transactions this week, adding in a quarterback, former quarterback of the Packers, not Aaron Rodgers, Boyle. I'm going to be
Peter Boyle.
honest.
What was his name?
Some, is it Nick Boyle or
Oh,
something
Dick
like
Boyle.
that?
Sorry, Peter Boyle was on
Um,
Everybody Loves Raymond, right?
some Jets fans were very angry about this. They look at his stats and said, but to me, he embodies a camp body, someone what knows the system. I don't mind it. He's essentially Mike White's replacement. I think Wilson will be the backup. I know some fans don't want that, but he, I think he will be unless they just pick up a project quarterback and he just lights it up in
Yeah.
camps. That's a bit of a non-issue. They've also signed Jefferson from the other Seahawks. We talked last week about they needed some D-line depth, and rumor is they'll pick up another Seahawks D tackle in Alwoods. Whereas they're not the headline signing what fans wanted, they're necessary. You've got to if you bring in Rodgers, expectation go up. So you've got to fill up this roster, fill out some holes, so you can pick the best player available, not a dire need in the draft.
Yeah, I agree. Look, you got to fill a roster out, right? And nobody gets excited about these moves, but it's not like you can go out and find a bunch of guys right now anyway for top-notch players, and you're going to pay a lot of money for the guy about to come in. So you got to fill the roster out as best you can. As far as the quarterback goes, you're right. I think Zach Wilson has to be the backup, and the upside of the whole Roger thing is, and we all know, and I'll preface this because we've got some people that maybe haven't heard me speak before. I am no fan of Aaron Rodgers. I've been very hard on Aaron Rodgers and his attitude towards the Packers and what they did or didn't do for him when he was taking his money and happy to take it from them and then complain about them not improving the team. But he's worked the gamble with the Patriots or the Patriots. Sorry, little Freudian slip there. With the Jets. And the thing that you got to remember is even with everything going on and the diva stuff with Rodgers, the word I've heard is that he worked really hard with Jordan Love and helped Jordan Love progress to the point where the Packers think he can play quarterback. And that's the other thing you want to think about with him and Zach Wilson, that if he does take that role on and everything doesn't implode here, it would help Zach Wilson for the future as well.
I agree, and also I do believe, even though some people believe Zach maybe needs to mature, Aaron Rodgers is the only quarterback who could bring in who Zach might be happier to essentially hold the clipboard for. He is his idol. So there's two things. You can set the fan base issue. We did pick this guy up second overall, but you can't miss out on a Hall of Fame quarterback. And to him, you can say, we're still going to develop you. If you work your ass off, then you will be the guy after Rodgers. So there's two ways you can swing it. Douglas comes out of it and he can sell it as no, it's not a bust. Opportunities opened up. So I'm intrigued. Whereas, like you, I've always his aura is a bit arrogant for my taking, but
Mhm.
he's a Hall of Fame quarterback, and I don't think he's eccentric. I don't think he's a bad guy, personally speaking. Now, I
I
wouldn't
think he's just
necessarily
weird.
want to
You
spend
know,
too much
I think
time in
he's
his
just weird.
company.
Right. I mean, maybe him and Zach will go off to a cave together. I don't know. And, he'll teach him all the Zen things he's learned in the last 3 years with whatever peyote he's smoking. But, look, he's not, we probably make him out to be a worse guy he is. My biggest problems with him with the crybabying he do about the Packers not making themselves better while he's taking every nickel he can get from them, and not doing the things like the Tom Brady's of the world had done and give money back so they can make the team better around him. Aaron
Um,
Rodgers never did that. He wanted it both ways, and that's the things that would get me upset about him. But I think all in all, he's not a bad guy. He helped the guy, unlike the guy he replaced in Green Bay, who wouldn't help him at all. He was willing to help Jordan Love, who was eventually going to replace him one way or the other. And that says something about him. I think he's just gotten weird the last 5 years. I don't know what happened to him, but
I think he's always been a bit more eccentric, but you're finding it out more in this day and age. But I've been told by in regard to his contract, he essentially said he'd give money back if they went out there and got playmakers. If they wouldn't spend the cap, he wouldn't. And I believe he has said something to the Jets that he'll rework the contract more friendly if they can
well, that's
bring in
good.
OBJ. So I don't have a problem with that. Look, you can't have it both ways. You can either want him to rework his deal, use it on something to make the team better, not like make your cap look good but not spend it. So to me, as I say, I've never been his biggest fan, but at the same time, if you want him to take less, he's not going to take less just for your good. It's got
Right.
to be to the benefit of the team, and they've done a terrible job at building around him.
Yeah, agreed. And that I laughed at the OBJ comment because I'm thinking, yeah, that's what like if they bring Rodgers in, they're not bringing enough gasoline to throw on that bonfire. Let's bring in OBJ as well. Sorry, I missed the football talk. Mentioned, yes, he's a quirky guy for sure.
So Bo is a Seattle guy. I guess he'd know about Turkey guys with some of the rumors about Wilson as well. Everyone check out Football Talk with Bo. Does a great job, not just football, but other Seattle teams, and played semi-pro. So be sure to check it out.
I'll tell you what. Speaking of Seattle, just a little sidebar. Pete Carroll's still one of my favorite coaches of all time. He obviously was a guy there before Bill Belichick, and he didn't do a tremendous job, but Robert Kraft still says that one thing he regrets is in his ownership with the Patriots is firing Pete Carroll. Believe it or not, I mean things worked out pretty good, so he's got to have a very high regard, and I think he means because he's such a good person and a good guy to have around the organization. Not that he's a better football coach necessarily than Bill Belichick, but I like Pete Carroll. I've always rooted for Pete Carroll.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I'm gonna go in the
To
dark.
me, yeah, he does. Aaron does like making it about himself, but show me a quarterback in the league what doesn't. So I'm over it. But this situation, I don't necessarily blame. I do think he drew his decision out a couple of weeks long, but now it's down to the Jets and the Packers to make a deal. I think he expected the Packers to do a deal far quicker, but it's not. This part isn't to do with him. In fairness, it's who blinks first. So
Agreed.
I wouldn't say he's an issue there.
We better move off Aaron Rodgers because the comments are getting
Yeah,
worse.
yeah.
I knew this would come from
Uh,
Rick, being a Vikings fan, is no fan of Aaron Rodgers.
so yeah,
I
and
was
we'll
happy
move
for
on to
the Patriots,
baseball
by the
because
way.
obviously there's them and Knicks
Yep.
as well. The New York Yankees, Keith. How would you judge their start to a season? I would judge it as pretty good, not like head of the class, if you will, but just as I expected them to. Do you agree with that? I'm perfectly happy if I'm a Yankees fan, but I wouldn't say it's like ticks all the boxes. It's just doing what you expect them to. Have you seen their start of the
I,
season?
I would say the same thing. I mean, there's some good things to take away from it. Volpe's played well. He's not hitting the ball great
Yeah,
yet, but he's making all the plays in the field. Judge is off to a good start as we would expect. Torres is off to a tremendous start, and which is a good thing. Even if it ends up being that they're going to end up trading him, which they still might. He might be their best trade chip if they really want to improve left field, third base, or pitching, whatever it might be. But Glaber's off to a great start. Donaldson's hurt already. Heron Hicks is getting booed. Nothing unexpected there. Rizzo's off to a nice start. Cole's been just phenomenal his first two starts. Nestor's been good. Again, the bullpen's been good for the most part. Pretty much what you expect, and a good thing that they got off to a good start because Tampa Bay gets off 6-0. So you don't want to end up 4 or 5 games behind after a week, which could have happened if they got away 2-4. So I think I think it's all in all, it's a good start.
yeah, I agree. Before we go to the Mets, Donaldson, I believe today there's reports he'll be moved to injury list. I don't know. Some fans, I don't know. Some fans have been wanting this. I guess from a Yankees point of view, you'll see what they've got. Um, they he's definitely a plus defensively. From a hitting point of view, someone could be coming in and at least match what he's doing. So, to
Yeah,
be honest with you, I'm intrigued what they look like because if nothing else, it will either make that rhetoric of fans louder or it'll sort of shut up that part of the point if no one comes in and at least does a good job. So I'm going to be intrigued by how
Yeah,
they look without him.
I mean, it gives them the opportunity now to keep DJ and Torres and Cabrera in the lineup every day, basically. And I'm sure there'll be some other guys mixed in. I don't know who they're bringing up to replace him. I didn't actually catch that, but um, listen, I'm of the opinion this could be. There's a possibility here, and I'm not saying it'll happen. This could be a very long stay on the disabled list for Donaldson because
I
if they decide he
I
can't
did
play,
think that.
he can't sit the bench. He can't be on the bench. He's got to go somewhere. So
I agree. So the Mets. What's your feeling about the Mets? To me, it's the same how I feel about the Yankees. Against some sides, particularly against Miami, they've won big. They haven't really proven anything to me what I wasn't thinking, but it's just what you'd expect of them. Is that how you feel about the Mets?
well, yeah. I mean, I think they could have got. Look at they haven't been awful. They lost their last
No,
three. Some bad losses in there to some bad teams. But they haven't hit the ball really well. Alonso's had some power, but I'd be worried. I mean, they're two pitchers that are 80 years old between them almost. One's on the IL, about ready to come off, but Scherzer's been getting knocked around, and that's got to be concerning for them right now. I'm sure he'll straighten it out, but the depth of that starting pitching worries me because Carrasco hasn't pitched well. Now Senga, the one bright spot I can say who's really been a bright spot is Senga was phenomenal in his first start.
yeah,
We'll see whether that continues or not. But if I'm the Mets, I'm not going to panic. Because I think they're going to make the playoffs, but I think they're going to finish well behind the Braves this year. Braves are just really good and loaded on offense and pitching. And I think the Mets, while they'll make the wild card, I just think they're going to finish. It's not going to be 101 wins for one and 100 for the other. I think the Braves are going to probably beat them by 8 to 10 games. I really do. But I think they'll
yeah,
sneak
I
in the
agree.
playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. So before we answer Rick's question about your content, and I've got an event coming up, the New York Knicks. We spoke about the success, the surprising success they've had this year. I'm not gonna lie, health-wise, um, I've got some health problems, and they're not doing my health any easier with obviously Randall got banged up. He should more or less be back for the playoffs, thankfully, with the playing tournament, but sort of giving him more time. But
Yeah.
top Topping then got banged up the other day. Bronson's been sitting, but it's one of those. If I'm them, I sit Robinson for the rest of it because he's too important. The health is the only thing what um they can't afford for a big piece to be injured because I think they match up fairly well with the Cavs. You don't know. Playoffs is different to regular season, so we will see. But for them to reach their ceiling, I think they need not just everyone back on the court, but firing on all cylinders. So I'm just holding my breath a little bit at this stage in case someone picks up a knock.
Yeah, you don't want to see more injuries, obviously. And I mean, if anything, this injury maybe has given Hartenstein a little more opportunity to play, and maybe he'll be able to help you in the playoffs because I think they need to. I mean, Jesus, the other night against the Pacers, I think they only played 8 guys, maybe 9 guys,
Yeah,
and only 7 scored. The whole starting lineup must have averaged about 30 points between the 5 of
yeah.
them. But I think it's giving the other guys a chance to kind of, step up a little bit and maybe. So if they have to step up in the playoffs, it won't be foreign to them. They're building some nice momentum. I want to stay healthy too, but I don't want to see them just kind of punt these last 2 games away. I'd like to see them head into the playoffs with the momentum they have right now, especially since they're going to play Cleveland, who I didn't think was a great matchup for them, but they handled Cleveland pretty well during this 5-game winning streak that they're on right now.
I agree. I mean, the biggest beneficial of some of the players been banged up this last 6 weeks because when one hasn't, but another one has, Grimes, he's really come into his own. The first half of the season, he looked pretty much like last year. Showed some good things, but some nights he just went missing. But he's been phenomenal these last 6 weeks. So that's a plus point of yes, people have been banged up. He's really sort of made up for their absence a little bit.
I agree. He has stepped up, and he's also a guy that I talked about box scores. Just looking at box scores, what his contributions doesn't always show up because he's a really good defender, and he does a lot of things on the court that don't show up in the stat line. And I think he's very important to this team's chances going forward this year and past this year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, can't wait for the matchup. Me and Bobby G's going to do some post games. Of course, that one of our Cleveland
Cool.
contributors. So looking forward to that. So before I talk anything what we're planning, did Rick have a question about
Let me go back
some of your
what he put up
one-on-ones?
here. Just had one was a comment. He was talking about keep the interviews coming. He likes that. He enjoys. Thank you, Rick. Rick's always very kind in his reviews of my interviews. And then he says, any contact with Jim Marshall, which I don't think I had on my list. And the only reason I didn't is because I've heard he's not in the best of health. So I'll look into that, Rick. He'd like to hear him his take, another former Viking, and I think Rick would like me to make it Keith Engle's one-on-one with the Vikings show, but they're interesting guys to talk to, so I don't have any problem with that. We're trying some others. I don't know if I put Ed Marinero on the list. I want to. He's an actor and was a really good player in college, and talked to him with Chuck Foreman about him, and he really loved the guy. So we're going to continue to try to get these guys. The only reason I didn't put Jim Marshall in, let me see if I can get some information on it, Rick. And if I do, I'll put Dan on his radar. His health was the only reason I didn't have Dan reaching out to him.
Obviously, we'll keep you informed, Rick, and yeah, Keith's doing a great job. That's one thing. Like when I was away, we talked about that. I always loved Keith's interviews. Obviously, time-wise is an issue, and I've got a little bit of time, and sometimes people hear the backstory, and some ex-pros hear the backstory and think it's kind of cool what the network's doing, so they're a little more receptive than just a random podcaster. So watch this space. And talking of the community before we wrap up, on Sunday the 23rd, I've got a bit of a special event. One of our long-time contributors, Rob Logan, who's been with us well over a year, his son's also contributed. His son's gym, which is connected to a church state, unfortunately had electrical fire,
Oh, geez.
so that burnt down. I'm not the biggest religious guy, but that being said, Lucas and Rob is important to me. That's important to them. So what I'm going to do is have a all-day stream. There will be a GoFundMe page or something, and should people want to give, they can. I'm still working it out, but be a little bit different. Some sports talk, but we've got some very talented guys in the community. So my basketball co-host is um, a professional performer, Dan. He's going to do a little piece what we're working on, and we are then going to use it in the Let's Talk Sports future promo. So that's sort of where we'll premiere it. And a couple of stand-up comedians will come on and make a few jokes about sports topics this year. So as well as some, I've got Alan interview with Super Bowl winning Cowboys. So everyone keep your eye out for that. And should someone want to be involved, please reach out to me, and hopefully we'll
Yeah,
show young Lucas our support.
let me know how I can help. I'd be happy to jump in there myself if there's any value I can provide.
Okay, thanks for that, Keith. And it's just one of those. It's what I want. Let's talk sports to be. Yes, we do talk sports, but leaders as well. So yeah, everyone, keep your eye out for what we've got planned, and I guess all what remains is for me to first thank everyone for commenting one of our busier shows in regard to comments, and also, of course, my co-host and very good friend Keith Engle for joining me.
Always happy to be here. I love the comments. You know how I love the comments, and a lot of my shows where I don't do a show with somebody like I do with you, they're my co-hosts, and they're my life's blood. So I love the comments.
Um, Thanks for that, Keith, and everyone. Don't forget to check Keith out Sunday morning with his Sunday stream of consciousness. Always a good time. He's very interactive with the chat. So, yeah, everyone, check that out. And yeah, I guess all what remains is for me to thank you for watching, and we'll be back next Friday. And until then, let's talk sport, fans.
Have a great weekend, guys.